And maybe people won't necessarily know what I did, but they'll know that DNA Angels had a hand in reuniting their families.
Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. Welcome to episode 148. And today I am speaking with Kelly. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you today, Lily?
I am so happy to be talking to you. First of all, this is Kelly Grace Hickey, if you know her through DNAngels or through social media. But Kelly, I want to ask you how Giving Tuesday went, because I haven't spoken with you in a month. So.
Giving Tuesday went fabulously. I want to thank everybody who donated, everybody who appeared. We had so many great guests. I was so tired. I didn't want to talk for 2 days after that. And of course, I had to go back to my day job the next day, and I was like, ugh. I'm not saying, I mean, my boss was like, you're being very quiet. And I'm like, just enjoy it.
You have to be exhausted. So if anyone, I mean, I had mentioned it on the podcast some months ago, but Giving Tuesday is it's the Tuesday directly after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a day that we choose to support our nonprofits, our charities of choice. And Kelly is a founder of DNAngels, who has helped countless NPEs, late discovery adoptees, donor conceived people find their birth parents, and more family members. You guys are amazing. Yes. And you find birth parents for free, right?
For free, yes. Anyone searching for a biological birth parent, it is absolutely 100% free. And of course, all the relatives that go with that. So we're not just going to say, here's, your dad is Bob, and not tell you anything else about them. Laura gets very excited when she finds a living grandmother, because that's very important to her. So when she finds a person whose father is young enough to have a living mother, or mother is young enough to have a living mother, and there's a living grandparent, she gets really excited about that. And it is really cool. And to answer the question as to how many cases we have solved to date is 3,829. And that is as of yesterday morning.
820. Oh, it just gives me goosebumps. Kelly, I love this. It's so amazing.
Isn't it? It is so fantastic. And I mean, that's just since we started counting in mid 2019, because we didn't really have a mechanism for keeping track of it when we first started. Laura and I have been together since November of 2018, but DNAngels didn't come about in its current form until February of 2019, and then we became a nonprofit in September of 2019. So, we didn't, there's probably a little room for fudging right there, but we count 3,829 as our official number, but it could be closer to 4,000 at this point.
Oh my gosh.
There's just so many, and there's every case always seems to spawn, related cases. So, we're working with I was working with my trainee the other day, and she's found this person's biological father. And as she's gone along, she's discovered that there's another NPE in the family, and she's waiting for him to reach out because we believe we have his biological father found too, but we're not going to count that until he reaches out to us. But, he had given her enough information so that she was like, I'm pretty sure that this is right where this gentleman fits. And I'm like, I agree with you 100%. So it's just, every case doesn't just touch one life. It touches so many, because it touches not just the person seeking, whether it's a mother or a father that they're seeking for, but it's, touches those, the families on both sides, any siblings that they may have, countless people that are just it's a nice domino effect,
Hmm.
one case doesn't just touch one life. It touches so many, and that's just so fantastic.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not always a positive thing, but we hope that it is.
Yeah. Well, that's so true because even if there is rejection involved, even if, people's personalities, character defects come to the surface, the thing is you still have the truth. You still have the knowledge.
Exactly.
Right?
And the truth is the most important thing. My own story, I do not have a relationship with my biological father or siblings. So, I always say to the clients, I live vicariously through your pictures. So send me your pictures. But, I at least know the truth. And I know, even though my mother has been dead for, gosh, 40 some odd years, I know I understand where she was at and where she was coming from, probably better than anyone else does, because I am just like her. I always thought, people always said, "Oh, you look so much like your mother. You must be, you're Pat's mini me." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am Patty's mini me." But looking at my biological father, she chose a man that there would be no questions as to, he had dark hair and dark eyes just like she did.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my father is blonde and blue, the gentleman who raised me, and the man that I call dad and is still my dad, he was my hero. And so I was really crushed when I found out that this man was no longer, biologically related to me, because personality wise, my husband would say, "You are so like him." Um, and he used to laugh at us because we would get into these little bantering arguments that he and I both, my husband doesn't banter very well, but my dad and I do. And we would get into these little bantering arguments and, just drive each other crazy with the answers. And it was all in good fun. And he didn't understand that. I mean, the last one that I can positively remember is he was in the hospital and he was trying to pick his lunch for the day, and he's looking at the menu and I was like, "Hey dad, get a, grilled cheese and tomato soup, some nice comfort foods." "Nah, I had that yesterday." I said, "Okay, well, look, dad, they have a perch sandwich. This is in Lake Erie area. They have a perch sandwich, dad. You love perch." "Yeah, no, that's no good. I had that the other day." Well, they have cream of mushroom soup. That's your favorite. No, it tastes like wallpaper paste. We went through the whole menu like this. And so finally he picks up the phone and he orders his lunch, and it's a grilled cheese and tomato soup. What was the first thing I suggested? That grilled cheese and tomato soup. I just said, "That's it. I'm done with you." And he's grinning the whole time. And my husband's over there just shaking his head, because this is, of course, before we ever even found out I was an NPE. And here's my dad and I having this conversation that is just so typical for us, because this is how we are. We just had this great rapport. I
Hmm.
mean, we could have really been a comedy team. Um,
I love it. And
so
is your dad still around?
no, he passed in 2014. Here's the funny
Mm.
story. So, my mother was terminally ill when she got pregnant with me. And in fact, the reason she got pregnant by another man was because my father wasn't going to oblige her. She had been told having another child could kill you. It could kill the child. The child could be born severely, mentally handicapped or physically handicapped. It's not a good idea. And so my dad, who comes from a very dysfunctional home, he had left home when he was 14 to move in with his father against, and back in the 40s, that was not a big, um, fathers didn't have rights in the 40s. The child
Yeah.
was always with the mother. Well, my father ran away so many times and ended up at my grandfather's house so many times that the judge said, "Okay, we'll try it, but you step one toe out of line and you're going to military school." And my dad did beautifully. I mean, he was, a good student. He was on the tennis team. He was a very likable guy, and very, very good student. And so he got to stay with his father. So he didn't have a good relationship with his mother. My aunts, his sisters, were a little off balance because of the whole divorce thing. I mean, my aunt used to talk about the tragedy, the tragedy. And I was like, "Dad, what is this tragedy?" My aunt keeps referring to, and he's like, "Oh, well, that would have been my parents getting a divorce." He goes, "Which wasn't a tragedy." He goes, "It was
Oh.
the best thing for everybody."
Mhm.
So, he had a very different take on it, and he did not have a lot of close family members. His family Even though his extended family is very large, his nuclear family was very small. He had two sisters, only one ever married. She only had one child. So this is important. I only have one paternal first cousin. This becomes important later, and you'll see exactly why. So he was more interested in having his wife and the child that he had and taking care of them than worrying about having another child, risking my mother's health and the health of the child. He did not want to upset the stability that they had. And so my joke was always, where does a terminally ill woman into ceramics and bowling and a good Catholic find a man? Well, the same place she found her husband, at work. They all worked together. My mom spotted my birth certificate father on her first day, his first day at the job, and she said, I'm going to marry that man. Apparently she did. And she also picked up my biological father there too. And my biological father came to my birth certificate father's funeral. He came to the funeral home. I don't know if he stayed for the funeral, but he and his wife came up and introduced themselves to me, not to my sister, to me. And I remember it mostly because the wife made some very odd comments about my mother. And she said, "Oh, I knew your father, and I knew your birth mother, your biological mother, or however she put it, but I didn't realize that the same man was married to both women." I'm thinking, well, how is that possible? Because, and I'm thinking, how did she not know that my mother, Patty Carson, was not married, married to, my father?
Yeah.
And it just kind of threw me because I couldn't figure it out. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it was because my mother was notorious in her mind. I don't know. I can't answer that question because he won't even have a conversation with me about it. But they came up and introduced themselves. And when I went to turn around and grab my sister to introduce her to these two people, they disappeared. It was like, 1 second they were there and 1 second they weren't. And I looked at my husband and my best friend who were standing on either side of me, kind of supporting me during this. And neither of them, my best friend's like, well, me, I don't remember a darn thing about that day. So, because when I asked her 4 years later, do you remember this? She was like, no. My husband barely remembers it, but he doesn't think, that he doesn't remember it being anything odd, and I'm like, well, okay. But, I turned around to grab my sister and all of a sudden he was gone. He was like, well, people move on. So he didn't think it was as odd as I did. And I thought it was very odd. But the whole importance to having that one sibling, that one cousin, that one paternal cousin, was that when I finally did DNA test a couple years later, I had two people that I did not recognize show up as close family first cousin. And I knew that they weren't on my mother's side because they were not Italian and they did not match with my Italian family. My mother was 100% Sicilian. Her parents were from the same village in Sicily. If you look at my DNA as compared to her younger brother, who was my third top match, my uncle, he is 100% Sicilian. And these two people did not match with him, and they were higher than him. And, so I put it aside. I didn't even think about it. It was, I'll figure out who they are later. I had actually initially done this to try and reconnect with some of my dad's family, some of these people that I didn't know. His father was one of like 7 or 8 or 9 children. And I knew nothing about my paternal grandmother because I had never actually even met her. She had been living in California my entire life, never met her. I've only met my paternal aunts, once or twice, a handful of times each. Never met the cousin. So I'm looking at these two people trying to figure out who they are and thinking I should know them if they're as close related to me as my uncle is. And I put it aside, and the woman wrote to me. It was a man and a woman. And the woman wrote to me and she said, well, my family's from Pennsylvania. We're German, and this, that, and the other. And I said, no, we're Scottish and Norwegian, and we're from Kentucky and Indiana, North Carolina. And then, I had already built my dad's tree. I built it in 2009 before any of, DNA testing was a big thing. I had built this beautiful tree for him, and had traced it back to England and even as far back as Scotland and France. And, I had beautiful, beautiful tree. And I couldn't figure out where did these people come from. So I gave her a list of names. Here are my family names, Moore, Carson, and I don't remember the other ones. And she said, nope, none of those are right. And so it didn't dawn on me for a year. And I just kind of let it go. And then one day I was sitting in my office, and by day I am an estate and family law paralegal. And I was writing a memo to the judge on a case proving that the deceased in this estate did not have any other living relatives because he had never married. There were no known children. And I was trying to prove that. And I'm like, how do you prove somebody doesn't exist? So I was on Ancestry looking up obituaries and birth certificates, death certificates, and, trying to figure out how I could prove that this man had no living relatives. I went back to my DNA and I went back to those messages, and I was like, this woman, she matches me at like 1,840 centimorgans. And I don't understand what that it means. I know she's got to be a close relative because there's my uncle right there, and she's higher than my uncle. How are we related? And she says this man is her brother. They cannot be first cousins. I have one first cousin, not two. And neither of them, this lady is not my cousin Maureen. I don't know who she is. And she says she's not related to my grandfather's family or my grandmother's. How am I related to her? And I'm talking to a friend of mine who actually has since passed away. And she had just found that day her half sister she had been looking for all of her life popped up on Ancestry. A little backstory here. Back in the 90s, I worked for a nonprofit organization that had lost touch with all of their retired members. And so one of the things that I did was I tracked down each and every one of those retired members. Spoiler alert, they were all in Florida because that's where apparently podiatrists go to retire. But this is before, of course, the internet was not, very big. This is like 92, 93, maybe 96 at the very latest. I don't really remember, but it was very difficult. But I've always had a knack for finding things and finding people. So she thought she had found her. She had a pretty generic name. And I said, let me take a look. Well, she hadn't found the right person, but I did find her and I put her in touch with her. And as I was talking to her, I said, Lisa, how do you know this is your sister? How do you know this is her? Because it's just a username. It doesn't say the name that you know her by. And she says, oh, it's by the number of centimorgans. And I said, okay, what's a centimorgan? And she gave me a little education. I said, well, how am I related to these people? And she was busy, so I went and I Googled, and I pulled up the DNA Detective's green chart. I'm sure everybody out there who's had an NPE experience has seen this chart. And it breaks it down, and it says half sibling, grandparent, grandchild, aunt, uncle, first cousin, double first cousin. Well, I knew the double first cousin was out, and so I started looking to figure out how old this woman was. I ruled out grandparent right away and grandchild, and so I was left with aunt and half sister. And so I was thinking, okay, there's a story out there that both my grandparents were a little bit, had part of their divorce was that she was a little bit wild and that he, was a little bit wild too. So maybe I have aunts and uncles out there that I don't know about. Maybe my grandparents both had affairs that led to other children. By this time, I figured out that my grandmother would have been too old to have a child. And that if it had been my grandfather's child only, that it would have been, it would have been half, and that was wrong. And I frequently, I kind of went around and I thought, well, maybe part of this tragedy that my aunt talked about that my dad's not telling me about is that she had two children she put up for adoption. Maybe they really are first cousins. And then I realized that wasn't working either because it was too high of a relationship. And it landed me last on on half sibling. And at that point I said, okay, well, if she thinks that she's my dad's child, then she's got something else coming because my dad would have been in Korea when she was conceived. Because I knew what the dates of my dad's Korean military service. And he would have been in country at the time that this woman would have been conceived because I had her birth date and I'd put it into a pregnancy conception calculator and it counted back 40 weeks and it gave me a date and it was smack in the middle of when he would not have been in this country. And I didn't have the date for the gentleman at the time, but this was enough to convince me that this was how it was related. And then it dawned on me that I had my uncle and I had my niece, my sister, my known sister's child also showed up, but she showed up at 798 centimorgans. And I'm thinking, all things being equal, my uncle and I and my niece and I should all have similar numbers, but she's half. So I went back to the green chart and it said first cousin, half niece or half nephew. And that's when the gut punch happened. Because I realized if she's a half niece, then my sister, my beloved only sister, this is what I used to call her when we were children. She's 15 years older than me. And I'd say, but Carla, you're my only sister. How could you do this to me? And I realized that she was my half sister, and that this other person and her sibling were my half siblings as well. And I went, Mom, what did you do? And I crawled into bed for 3 days. This was Memorial Day weekend. I crawled in bed on Friday, crawled out on Tuesday morning, and I just laid in bed and sobbed the whole weekend because I didn't know what to do. And I called my best friend, the one that was standing next to me at the funeral, and her response was, well, Ancestry's got a hold of your digital footprint and they're just punking you. They just picked a random man. I said, yeah, you know what? If they had picked a guy from like Saudi Arabia, I would believe you on that. Mm-hmm. But they picked a guy that lives the next town over from where we are. Because I had already looked up the entire family. I knew where he lived. He lived in the town that factory my parents all worked in was at. And that was only like 10 miles down the road. And I said, I would believe that except for the fact that he lives so close. Mm-hmm. And his kids went to the high school in our town, the same high school that we would have gone to had we not lived out in the country, because we lived, 5 miles out of town. So we were in a different school district. And she says, yeah, it's just a big mistake. And I said, well, let's just figure this out later. So I gave up on her. And I wasn't going to tell my sister because I knew that this would just ruin, our relationship. And, we're not that, she and I are very different. I wasn't about to tell her. And I eventually did tell her. And she's the one who figured out that they all worked together. She called up. She actually unblocked an ex-boyfriend on Facebook so she could reach out to him and have him ask his brother, who had just retired from the same factory, mm-hmm. if this other man had worked with our parents. And he had. And I said, you know what, had I just looked at the newspapers.com, I would have looked, because my dad's picture was all over it for awards and commendations. So was this man's. They were all right there. And in fact, there's an article I think that has both of them in it. Mm. So, and I went, you know what? I think he showed up at the funeral. I think it was that man that came up and introduced himself, and his wife said something really strange about my mother. And it was. But it's because of all that, I was feeling like I was the only person in the world who this had happened to. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, what have my parents done? And about 3 weeks later, my phone suggested an article I might want from the Atlantic Monthly about a support group for non-paternal events or not parent expected. And I went, what's that? And I read the article and I went looking for the support group. And I got very active in the support group because for me, my biggest thing is helping people helps me. I do best when I am putting aside what's going on in my life and reaching out to others to bring them through their grief. So I became one of their staff members, and I was one of the people that would greet new members. And they eventually put out a call for search angels. And I said, well, I don't really know anything about this DNA stuff. I did solve my own story, but, I kind of had a half sister, so that's not really difficult, but I'm good at finding people. You give me anybody in the world, I can find them. Give me enough information. And usually I only need name, approximate age, and last place you knew them to be. And I can usually find them. And he said, okay, I'm going to put you with the group. The other two ladies are both angels. and you're going to kind of be the person that helps them find things. And they can teach you the other stuff along the way. And one of them was Laura Olmsted. And we connected right away. I mean, she would find them, and then I would wrap it up with a bow and say, okay, here's all the living family members to this person if they happen to be deceased, or if they were still living, here's their address and phone number. Let's make contact with them. And we went like that. We solved 200 cases like that between November and February, which is when we broke away from the support group. And the reason we broke away was because they wanted us to only help their members, their approved NPEs. We wanted to help everybody. We didn't care if you were an adoptee who was, late discovery, or if you had known all your life you were adopted and you just wanted to know where you came from. We didn't care if you had been a child who maybe was raised by a single mother and just never knew dad, or somebody who was in the foster system who you had your parents' names, but you weren't raised by them. We didn't care. As long as you were looking for a parent, we wanted to be able to help. So we broke away from them and we changed our name to DNAngels. And that was brought about by, we made a poll in our client room and we said, okay, we need a new name. And one of our clients suggested DNA and then append angels to it, but only one A. So DNAngels. And we liked it. Now it's caused some problems over the years because people aren't sure how to say it. Is it DNAngels? Is it DNAngels? It is DNAngels. You pronounce both A's, but you only spell it with one. So, it's one of those, it's kind of like it's its own foreign language there.
I like it.
We like it too. And we have a client that designed the tree of life and DNA symbol that you see on our website and everywhere. He was Laura's very first client, and it took her 3 years to solve his case. Amazingly enough. And like we say to people, we don't ever give up. And then we trot this client out as our proof. Here's our client. He was our very first client. Laura was working him when we were still with that support group. He was the very first person she was ever working with. And it took us this long to solve him because, just all of the craziness going on in his biological family tree, because, not everyone's family tree is a simple straight up and down tree. I mean, my own Sicilian tree is pretty crazy too. I have an aunt and uncle who are actually first cousins to each other. And so my husband, who's from South Georgia, always says, and you give me grief. And I said, you know what? We're Sicilian. It's a small island. You marry your cousin sometimes. He said, yeah, but that happened here in the United States. And I'm like, I'm not making any excuses for it. But, there are things that happen like that, wherein people marry their cousins, or there's a lot of broken trees, like I am convinced there's a city in Florida that hates me because every time I get a client from this little town in Florida, there are always so many broken trees to try and navigate. And it's like, I've got all these tree pieces and I don't know how they go together because, somebody is an NPE on this branch and there's somebody else that's an NPE on that branch. And it just gets crazy. And, depending on ethnicity, sometimes you go back and you just can't get too very far because of recent immigrants or because of slavery or whatever the question is. I mean, my own Sicilian family, I can only go back to my great grandfather, I think, my great great grandfather. And that's as far as it goes. After that, the records get very murky because all the names are the same. We keep recycling them. It gets nuts. And of course, spelling name changes and things like that, so, we do our best, but we don't give up. That's the whole point of that, is that, it may take us 3 years, but we're not going to give up. Just because the DNA isn't there, because, people are testing all the time. We're looking forward to February when the first of the Christmas tests start coming in. They should be rolling in end of January, beginning of February. And, you never know who's going to test. I had a young man test last year, and he's one of my favorite clients. He had no idea he was an NPE, and he comes back and he comes into screening and he says, I have a full father match and I don't know who this man is. And so we worked through it, and it turns out it was his father. And mom just never told him. Mom is still denying to this day that this man is his father.
Mm-hmm.
But we know better than that.
Yeah.
um, he's made contact with the gentleman, and they have a relationship started, and he sent me pictures back of both of them at the same age, and I am just floored at the resemblance. Genetic mirroring, it's a real thing, folks. It's not just for adoptees anymore. I mean, for those of us who have never known a parent, or for you're discovering it, that is so important to be able to look in the mirror and to see that a face that looks back at you that you can see traits in. And I see that so much with my biological father, that it's crazy. I didn't understand it until then, and now it's, I get a little bit, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of what our adoptee partners are going through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get, I may not understand all of the trauma, but I can at least understand the genetic mirroring.
And speaking of genetic mirroring, in 2014 at your father's funeral,
Mhm.
I'll say your BCF's funeral, but it was
Uh-huh.
your dad.
My dad.
So was that your first time actually? I mean, you didn't know you were speaking with your birth father. Was that the first time you had really spoken to or met your birth father?
I believe so. Again, they worked together.
That's true.
So there have been times over the years that I had been to the plant for like open houses, especially around the holidays,
Yeah.
that it's possible that I met him then. I
Yep.
don't remember. I was a scholarship winner for that particular my high school year, my senior high school year. I was one of the 3 scholarship finalists for the company. So I went through a process where I met with different people in the plant to be interviewed. I don't know if he was one of them. I don't remember. I have some of the paperwork from it, and I've looked back, and I don't see his picture in any of the documents I have, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. He may have been there, and he may have recognized my face. Well, I mean, obviously, people ask me all the time, are you sure he knew? I'm positive he knew. My mother worked there when she got pregnant with me. She came back shortly after I was born, and then she, worked there for a couple more months, and then had to quit because of her illness was advancing. My mother had pulmonary scleroderma, which is a disease. Scleroderma normally attacks the skin. um, Pulmonary scleroderma attacks the lung tissue, so it hardens the lung tissue. It
Mm.
basically creates lung cancer because it causes abnormal cells. And she was diagnosed with it 10 years before I was born, so probably about 1962, and she was given 10 years to live. So I was born in 1972, and she lived until 1977. And my father always said, I gave her an extra 5 years. Um,
Mm.
and of course, when he said that, I was just like, I can't believe you just said that, Dad.
Mm.
Because this woman was the love of his life. He is buried next to her, even though he was married to my stepmother for longer. And it was kind of funny because when he passed, I thought I was going to have to fight to have him buried in Bellevue. And I was told, no, he's going to. My stepmother called me as I was driving up from Georgia to Ohio, and she said, well, I thought we could do the order of the ceremony. We'd have the ceremony, and then we'd drive out to the funeral home, or drive out to the cemetery and have the burial. No, wait, how'd she say that? Instead of driving out to the cemetery and having the burial and then going and having the luncheon, I didn't want people to be driving from Fremont to Bellevue and then back again. I figured we would do the luncheon before the burial, and then people can come out afterwards. And I went, what do you mean? Bellevue? And it dawned on me when she said Bellevue, that's where my mother's whole family is. That's where my mother is. And I said, oh, we're burying him in Bellevue. And she says, yes, that's what he wanted.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, I'm not even gonna. I thought I was gonna have to fight. Um, I was spoiling for a fight and ready to go. And of course, my sister, who is, she's a little bit scrappy. I was waiting for her to jump in on it too. And I called her up and I said, Carla, they're gonna bury Daddy next to Mom. And she said, well, it's only appropriate. And I said, well, yeah, I know it's only appropriate, but you know, he's been married to this woman longer than he was married to her. And she
Yeah.
said, I know. And, we didn't know if we would be able to have that fight.
Yeah.
So we were actually already planning on having him exhumed and moved at some point.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, I didn't have any clue. I didn't know, the name didn't sound familiar, and I actually floated it by my stepmother, and I said, "Hey, does this name sound familiar?" He approached me at the funeral. And of course, it was 4 years later by the time that I knew that he was my biological father. And of course, in 4 years, she was like, "Yeah, I don't remember anyone by that name." Um, I've been looking for a photo from the last year my mother was alive. She passed in March of 1978. So from October of 1977, I'm looking for a photo of my mother and father's last Halloween party, because they had a bunch of people from the plant. And I'm convinced that he might have been in it, but I can't find it. And I know it's at my sister's house, and I know it's in this scrapbook I put together when I was about 17. And she swears up, down, left, and right, she has no idea where that scrapbook is.
Oh, Kelly, you really do have an amazing brain. Just listening to you with solving these cases and how you can find people, I believe it. I'm like, wow, you have an amazing memory.
Well, that's the funny thing. I do have a photographic memory.
Mm, no
And
wonder. That must be very helpful in
it's
your.
helpful because I'm also dyslexic.
Oh.
So I cannot speak another language. I cannot read music. I can play piano, but it's by ear.
Hmm.
Everything I've played is either by ear or I memorize. And I can speak a language as long as I've memorized. I can't string words together normally, but I can read it and regurgitate it at you.
Wow.
But yeah, I can't think on the fly. So as long as it's something that is something I can put together from pieces that I know, which is, I think, how DNA is. You put it together from what you know.
Mm.
You're looking at a 900 centimorgan match. That's going to be either a first cousin, a half niece, nephew, half uncle, half aunt. It's going to be something in that range. So you kind of know where it might fit, and it's just kind of like putting a puzzle together. And I've always been very good at puzzles, which oddly enough is something that my half sister is very good at as well. My
Mm.
paternal half sister. And
Oh, okay.
yeah, I have had conversations with her. She's tried to keep me from the rest of the family. She hasn't done a great job, because I've reached out to several other of them. I've reached out to my father, I've reached out to my half brother, and gotten radio silence from both of them. But she did. We did exchange quite a few emails, and she and I are very much alike. Whereas my sister that I grew up with and I are from different planets. Um, she and I are very, very alike. We both like tea. We both like mysteries. We both like puzzles. We're both the problem solvers for the family. We're the strength in the family. When something goes wrong, everybody in the family comes to her. Well, if something goes wrong, everybody in the family comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was the one, when my father died, I was the one that my stepmother had called. She didn't call my stepsister or my sister. They called me. And it
Mm-hmm.
was my stepsister's husband that told me that my father had passed, and that I needed to call my sister. And I was like, "Oh, great. You leave me with that task.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. It's better than the other way around. I understand." Um, but it's scary. And Laura has actually read some of the emails between us. And actually, my sister tried to shut down my blog on the DNAngels website down. And she corresponded directly with Laura. And she says, "You two write so much alike." And I said,
Mm.
I can't help that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just who we are. And I always thought I got my writing from my grandfather, because my grandfather was a writer, and so was my aunt, my dad's father and sister. And apparently I don't get it from them.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I mean, so many little things that I always thought were family traits from one side, I keep finding are family traits from the other. She has shared pictures with me, and she shared me a photo of my grandfather with me. And I am the only grandchild to inherit his wild curly hair. Now, if you see pictures of me, my hair is generally straight.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of work.
A lot of work to
A
get it like,
lot of
yep.
work like that, because right now, if you could see it, I've got it just pulled back in a headband and it's just like everywhere. I was like, well, thank God this isn't going to be a video blog.
No, I turned the video component off.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Right now you would be looking at my Pink Panther anyhow, because that's where the computer's pointed. Um,
and
so
and your
yeah.
4 cats.
Well, yeah, no, actually I left them out, and
Oh, yes.
there's actually 6 of them.
Oh my gosh, Kelly.
Yes, the Hickey Hostel, and that's a low number for the Hickey Hostel for Misfit Cats. We've had upwards of 9 at times. But yes, the Misfits are all out in the other room. I can hear one of them outside the door, and I have a feeling that's probably little Daisy. She's only about 6 months old.
And I should say, you call them misfits because they are like
They are misfits.
missing eyes and paws, and you have a
Yeah. I've got one that's diabetic that has he used to have a Dexcom on, so he sometimes wears a t-shirt. I've had several with missing eyes, missing paws. Let's see, who else do we have right now? Let's see, Percy's missing an eye, Daisy's missing an eye, and Patty are all missing eyes. Patty also has autoimmune issues. Go figure. The poor cat is scabby from head to toe. Yeah, she's sweet, but she's sweet but scabby. Eugene is diabetic, and we've already discussed Poe has his own issues. He's just
Poe the a-hole cat.
That's him. Yeah.
Oh, I love your house. I love it. I love your household. The sister you're speaking of, this is the 1800 centimorgan half sister you found through Ancestry, right?
That's her.
So you started messaging her and she was responsive?
Okay, she messaged me first. Okay. Remember, now she had reached out to me on Ancestry. Oh, yes. It took me over a year to actually respond, but she messaged me first, and she knew what the relationship was. I believe my father's DNA is on Ancestry. I know it used to be on GEDmatch and MyHeritage, and also on Family Tree DNA, because when I never had uploaded to them. You know, we always suggest to people, if you're looking for more matches, upload to these 3 free sites. Well, I had never done it. And so when I came back to DNAngels, I actually did take a hiatus. My half sister that I never knew, the second oldest, passed away in 2019. And I kind of went through this phase of, how can I tell people to reach out to them and face rejection when I still had not, I was abiding by the rules set down by my sister that I would not contact anyone else. And in the meantime, one of them dies on me. She's never going to know about me, except, you know, if you believe in heaven and you believe that, you know, she's looking down on me and she knows everything now. If you believe that, then yes, she knows now. But I will never have a relationship with her. And she and I mean, my sister, we'll call her Carrie for lack of a better name. It's not her name. It's not anywhere close to her name. But Carrie had told me all about my 2 other sisters and my brother. And I share little tidbits in common, like the one that passed. Her favorite holiday was Christmas. I love all holidays, so I'm not picky. You know, I will celebrate Arbor Day if you want, you know, but she loved holidays. And I found out that I share a profession with the youngest sister. And in fact, seeing pictures of her, she and I have the same RBF. We look a lot alike. I'm surprised people in our hometown did not notice it, but we are 12 years apart. So, you know, maybe that's why. I left when I was 14. And so there wasn't anything to compare teenage me to teenage her. And then my younger brother, well, he's the youngest, he's still 9 years older than me. And I've never had a brother. That was the thing I was really excited about. I really want a brother. I have 3 stepbrothers. It's nothing like having a real brother, let me just tell you. Yeah. I had this little crisis of faith, and I said, I can't do this. You know, she's passed. I'm never going to meet her. I've been abiding by these rules that Carrie set down, and I can't I can't in good conscience tell people it'll be okay. Go ahead and reach out. No matter what it is, it'll be okay. I mean, even if it's a rejection, it's going to be okay because at least you have your truth, because I couldn't even overcome my own issues. So I stepped away. And when I came back, it was because, oddly enough, my step nephew, Corey, who is a very sweet kid, posted on Facebook right around this time in 2021, like end of 2020, beginning of 2021. Does anyone know how to do this DNA stuff? And I reached out to him and I said, what do you need? Because first of all, please don't try to tell me you are not your father's child, because you look just like him and I know your mother. And he says, no, no, it's for my friend Nick. Nick's never known his dad, and we've decided this is going to be the year. And I said, okay, I know this group, and we'll do this, but you got to make a nice donation. Mm-hmm. And if you're and they were going to be documenting this the whole way, and you got to include us in the documentary. Mm-hmm. And he says, done. So I reached out to Laura and I said, hey, how about one more case together? One last case. And she says, okay. So we found Nick's dad within about 3 hours, just one Sunday in January. And they've been filming it. Nick actually met his dad around Labor Day of 2021. And I still haven't, that was my one last case. I'm like 200 and some cases past that now.
Oh.
We
can't quit.
I can't quit. And it's just because this is my passion. I've always said I wanted my life to have some kind of meaning. And that meaning wasn't just going to be taking care of a bunch of misfit cats, even though I have a cat that was so popular, he had his own Facebook and everybody loved him. That was Jack. I want my life to have meaning. I don't want to just be one of these people that you look 100 years from now and you're like, well, who was that? I want somebody to know what I did. And maybe people won't necessarily know what I did, but they'll know that DNAngels had a hand in reuniting their families. I mean, there's so many good stories out there. I mean, all stories are worth telling, whether or not you got your closure or whether it's, all you have is the truth, but no relationship, because we're not guaranteed a relationship. We're not entitled to a relationship. We're just entitled to the knowledge. You have that right to know where you came from, to know what your accurate medical history is. I can't promise you that it's going to be like the client I was telling you about earlier. She gets a text every day from her biological dad. And that just touches my heart so much. Just watching that, even just from the sidelines, or knowing that, our clients, we have so many of our volunteers were clients first, and watching them have that first Christmas with dad, or the fact that one of them, her grandmother, swiped her DNAngels ornament that I sent to dad for his donation. Dad donated to our Christmas in July, and I sent him one of those, little purple plastic ornaments that we had, and grandma swiped it for her tree. That just tickled me pink, because it's that Doppler effect. We didn't just touch her life. We touched her dad's life and his mother's life. Plus, of course, all the siblings that she's got now from dad, and aunts and uncles, things like that. It makes getting up in the morning and like looking at your client list and thinking, today I'm going to help somebody. Even if it's just to tell them, hey, your dad was this man. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, he's passed, but here's his legacy. The more I can find about a person, the better. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. But I mean, I've heard so many crazy and wonderful stories along the way. I mean, sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I think I've got who it should be, but I really just need an expert opinion on this. So we'll take a look at it, and I'll be like, yeah, you nailed it. And then they'll tell me about their family, and I'll just take in those stories, because I treasure every single story that I've ever heard, whether it's a good story or a bad story. I mean, I had one lady that her biological grandfather pimped grandma out during the Great Depression to make money.
Oh boy.
Right? So was this man that I thought was actually his child? Yeah, I think he really was. But, crazy, isn't it? I mean, sometimes it comes down to, you know, your dad is one of these two men. Both of them were a year apart. They served in the service together. Then they went into business together. Neither of them married. They lived together. I can't tell you which one it was because their digital footprints, what's left of them after 30 some odd years, is exactly the same. You
Mm.
know, they're both deceased. None of them had any children that we know of, except you. You're the child of one of these two men.
You hear so many stories when you start to do service work in the community, and they just stick with you, right? They're
Every single one.
yeah.
I may not remember your name, but start telling me your story, and I'll be like, yes, I've heard this before, and then I'll fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Um, my so I have a terrible memory for names and faces, and it gets harder, of course, when you don't see a person. All you see is maybe a picture. But I have a terrific memory for voices and stories. And that's how I used to be a 911 dispatcher. And of course, that's how I dispatched my police officers, was by voice. If they cut off their radio number, but they started talking, I knew exactly who it was.
Mm.
And if they come up to me on the street now, they may know what I look like, but I don't remember what they look like. And if they're not in uniform, forget it,
Yeah.
Especially if it doesn't have a badge on it that says, Smith. Oh, but they start talking and I'll be like, I know you.
Yeah.
And I'll call them by their unit number. I've done that before. I used to walk into court. My very first time in court, I walked in and I heard a voice and I turned around and went, oh, you're the guy who does the transports every morning. I don't remember his unit number or his name now, but I turned around and I knew exactly who it was.
Oh, interesting.
Because I just have that kind of auditory. So I remember things like stories. And so, if I were to hear, if I had been worked on your case and I knew your story as intimately as I do some of these others, and I couldn't remember, like Laura will come to me and she'll say, hey, who was that client we had? And we'll start filling in the details of the story. And then we still can't remember the name. And finally I'll hit on something that I can, hang on, let me look through my chats for this phrase, and it'll pull up the name. And it's because, gosh, she's worked herself probably 2,000 cases.
I heard that. I was going to say she's done over 1,000 for sure. So
she's done over 1,000 for sure, but probably closer to 2.
Oh my God.
Because she's just, I always make fun of this because I would say Laura is so fast with the DNA that she would say, okay, we've got a case. And I'd be like, okay, I'd get my computer, get my drink, be all set up, ready to go. And she's like, okay, and dad is Bob. Go find him.
Whoa.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're sure. And,
Wow.
she's just that quick. She can look at the DNA and just see these connections that, that's her special superpower. She's fantastic.
Amazing. And yet she could probably be a PI for thousands and thousands of dollars doing this, but yet you guys are doing it for a nonprofit. I love it. I love it.
Well, we have, Laura would tell you that when she made her discovery, and hers was not as obvious as mine was, she didn't pop with a half sister. And of course, actually, if she had, she probably would have known it, before I did. Like I said, it took me a year to figure it out. A year. Actually, it took me a year to answer her. It took me 2 years. She actually had it narrowed down to a family of men. And wasn't sure which one it was. And then, of course, she talked to them, and she talked to the one that was living, and he remembered her mother as dating the brother that is her biological father. And she will tell you that at that point in time, she didn't have the money to hire a professional genealogist. It starts at like $2,500 for a retainer, and that's like 10 hours, so $250 an hour figure for a retainer. But you have to I've paid people like this for work through my my day job as an estate paralegal. I've paid to find missing relatives for estates.
Sure.
And you have to pay even if you only use 6 of those 10 hours, you still pay the 10-hour retainer. They do a good job, but it took 6 months, I think, for me to get the answers to who. I had a name. I had an estate where I had a name, and I knew anecdotally that this person was possibly the half sibling of the decedent. And I just needed to prove that she was truly a half sister. And it still took them 6 months to do that. I mean, because it took them that long to get started and then that long to do whatever it takes they done. I mean, I know that they didn't spend all 10 hours of my retainer on it,
Yeah.
but she said there's no reason that anyone should have to pay to find out who their parents are.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, now we do have paid services. If
Yep.
you think great grandma was an NPE and you want us to find her DNA through your DNA, then that's a paid service, because that is so much harder. And that's something beyond my skill level. I would never be able to do that. But we have angels who are able to do that. We have one that is very good at doing that. And she'll actually look at your case before she accepts it and say whether or not she believes she can find it.
Mm.
And if she doesn't think that there's enough DNA for her to do her job, she's not going to accept the case, and you're not going to pay her the money. Because
Now,
she's just that honest about it.
are you guys looking for more angels? I know you guys have dozens of them. What, probably 20, 30 of them right now?
We have 60 volunteers, but we only have probably about 15 angels. We
Okay.
that covers our board of directors, our research group, our intake people, our angels, and then just we have some miscellaneous volunteers. We have a guy that does our website, a guy that does our statistics.
Yeah.
We have a writing group. Yes, we are always looking for volunteers, and if you're interested, you can reach out to Aimee, that's AIMEE, at DNAangels.org. So DNAngels.org. And she is our associate director of staffing. And everybody pretty much starts out in research. And then once they have the basics of how we do things down, they can be moved up to being an angel. And then they get assigned a mentor. Um, like I said earlier, I have a mentee right now. She's on her last case with me. Bless her heart. She's probably working her little heart out right now. She's so good. But we have a format. But if you're interested in like becoming an intake specialist, anything, even if it's just writing for us, I'm always looking for writers for the writing group,
Yep.
because we have a newsletter that we put out monthly, and we put out stuff on the website. So anytime, if you're interested, just write to Aimee, and she'll direct it to the correct person if it's not something under her, like if it's writing or if it's intake. Because we do a lot, so for those who don't know our process, we have an intake specialist that greets you. You can apply on our website, or excuse me, on our Facebook screening room, and an intake specialist will reach out to you, and that person will walk you through the steps of sharing your DNA and tree, because we don't go into your account. There's a way to share your ancestry DNA and tree with us that we can edit them and put all the information in your tree, so that once we're finished with you, we can remove our access, and then you still have all that work we've done. And that makes it easier, because ancestry doesn't like us to have more than so many trees in DNA, or else we can't. I think we have 6 pages of them right now, and it's just getting to the point where it's ridiculous. We actually have 3 accounts because we have so much DNA and so many trees. But if you don't work through Facebook, we do have an angel team that works via email, and that would be Renee. She's very good at that, and we can direct you to that. If you have any questions, the info email is always answered by somebody, even if it's me some days.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a whole team of intake specialists, researchers, angels, people that'll just do just about anything to help you find your truth. It's something we all believe in, each and every one of us, because we've either been the recipient of it, or we have angels that maybe are not NPEs or not adoptees, but somebody in their family is, and they found them through DNA.
Right.
2 of our angels right now, we have a sister group where they started out looking for their adopted niece by testing at 23andMe and Ancestry and just hoping that she popped up, because unfortunately that would have been the only way to find her.
You have to be good at this. I've tried to help a neighbor figure out the DNA stuff, and it's a, like you said, it's a puzzle for sure. Like opening the tabs and then pulling up the chart and how much shared symptom work. I mean, it is not in my forte for sure. So I just really appreciate every member of your team that does this. It's so important work.
It is. It really is. And even if you just have, if you have the heart, we'll at least try to work with you. I mean, the intake, the research test to get on board with research isn't that hard. It's just, seeing how good you are at basically using Google. um,
Yeah.
How can you find these things? Because if you can find, I think it's an obituary and an address and a couple of other things, if you can find these things, if you can use some tools, basic tools that we have, like Find a Grave or Been Verified or White Pages, or just, like I said, Google search works wonders.
Yep.
People say, oh, how did you find that? And I'm like, well, I just hit Google and I typed in, obituary, Bob Smith, New York, 1982, or whatever.
Yep.
You never know what'll pop up. And we have a research team that is headed by two women that, if you don't know how to do it, they will show you how to do it. I mean, they are so good at this. I mean, they really are. And by the time you're ready to be an angel, whether it's like a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever, you're going to know what you're doing. I've been blessed. The last two people I've been able to mentor have been fantastic angels. They're going to be real assets they already are real assets to DNAngels. They're both very, very sweet ladies, and I loved working with them.
We had someone on who used you guys years ago. And again, I'm like you, I can't remember names, but I could remember her story. And she was like, I used DNAngels. They were so amazing. And now I'm an angel. And, it's taken some years of process, but I have, I think, probably about right now published 147 episodes. And so many people constantly bring up DNAangels and search angels. And
I'm going to bring an angel for us, because I know she is an angel for us. Oh, goodness.
Well, this was, a year or two ago. Probably season 2 or 3.
Okay. I can think of several people I know that have been clients of ours that have become angels, even if they're not currently angels with us, or not. Or like, I know we had a client from our early days that I believe she's doing search angel work, and she's fantastic. We had, it was one of those heartbreaking stories where both men that could possibly be dad were both deceased at a young age. And it's like, oh my God, can't we just find a living father? No. I mean, obviously I know that if they're like my age and I'm 50 or older, the chances get smaller and smaller, but especially, I think you said you had a 90-year-old client on. Yeah. Obviously we're not going to find a living dad for her, but we might have been able to find siblings, hopefully. Yeah. But I hate having to say, and, your mother or your father is deceased. That always kills me, especially when I've got like a young person. Like I had a young lady a couple of months ago, and her mother would have been my age. And her mother had passed like several years before she even started looking for her. And that just killed me. I did not want to tell her mom was deceased, because I understand how that feels. Both my parents are deceased, and I don't want to have to break someone else's heart. Yeah. I don't know what's worse, finding a living parent that doesn't want to have anything to do with them, or finding a dead parent that they just won't ever have the opportunity.
Oh, that is sad. Mm-hmm. And that is, and I'm going to bring this up because you are not, but money, donations probably would always be something helpful as well. If people had the ability, had the means to. I'm assuming you guys are still accepting donations through your website,
yes.
Facebook page?
Our website, DNAangels.org/donate. You can always donate to us. We do accept donations. Currently, that is how we are basically keeping the lights on. I think I mentioned we have 3 Ancestry subscriptions. We have several to Been Verified, because we can only have like 3 people use a Been Verified account at any point in time. So like the one I manage, I have 2 angels that are in it with me, but I can't give it out to a third, because then Been Verified will notice a third IP address and like shut it down.
Yep.
Um, we have subscriptions to things like DNA to Tree, which is a wonderful tool that we use to help find the most recent common ancestor. If you have an iPad or an iPhone, it's a great tool.
Yeah.
I can't even think of everything we have subscriptions to because there are so many. I mean, the website, we have to pay for the website. We have to pay for, the forms that we use to do our hold harmless agreement and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that. It's amazing, how much cost there is to running a nonprofit.
Yes.
We're not profiting, but we still need, so much money a month to get all of our things because it's beyond the point where we can pay for it anymore. When we started out, we paid for our ancestry account, we paid for our been verified. We have actually a secondary lookup site that we use called Skip Genie, that we can find out if a phone number is actually a good number or not, if it's connected,
Mm.
which is invaluable because sometimes, if you look at a white pages or a been verified report, there'll be 10 phone numbers and you're like, where do I start? How do I even
Yeah.
know? Um,
Some landline from 2005 isn't necessarily going to help you.
right. And again, that depends on the age of the parent. If you've got a parent that's, in their 70s or 80s, yeah, that landline is probably still good. My
Mm.
parents' landline from the 70s is probably still active. Um, you know,
Yeah.
I don't have a landline, haven't had one since like mid 2000s, but um, you know,
Yep. Yep. Depending
s-
on the age of the generation of the person, and that might be helpful.
right.
Mhm.
Plus we also do things like we send out DNA tests to people, um, and we have my heritage kits, we have 23andMe kits, we have ancestry kits, and they have to demonstrate a need for it, but not everybody can even afford the $99 it costs to get a test, so we buy them on sale at Black Friday and stuff.
Oh, smart.
Yeah,
That's so smart.
in fact, our Christmas in July fundraiser every year, that Christmas in July fundraiser, the funds from that are what we use to buy the DNA kits. That's why it's Christmas in July.
That makes sense. And I think I saw the cheapest ancestry test I've ever seen. Did you see that $49?
Yep, that's what we got.
Yep. Oh, good for you guys.
Hmm.
That is so smart. Oh, also, I was thinking about on Giving Tuesday, you guys had that long telethon.
Yes.
I mean, the one where you probably lost your voice talking for so many
I
hours.
did.
I came on after Eve Wiley and Jacoba Ballard. I was amazed. I mean, I've seen Jacoba Ballard's heroic Netflix documentary, Our Father, and that was just, I love how involved she is in the community and continues to be. But you guys even had her, she even does a lot of work for DNAngels, really. How did you guys make that connection?
Well, so gosh, with Jacoba, I believe Laura said, "Hey, we should reach out to her," and I did. Um, you
And
know,
she responded.
she responded. Let me take a look. I'm pretty sure that that's how it happened. Um, yeah, June 28th. Hi, Kelly. My name is Kelly Grace, and I'm the associate director of DNAngels. Um, and I wanted to she had been sending referrals our way, I think.
Oh,
Kind of like you have in the past,
mhm,
even though we didn't really know you very well. And I was like,
mhm.
one of my hats that I'm supposed to wear is outreach. And so I've been trying to make the connections with the people in the community, such as yourself, such as Jacoba, such as Eve. And Laura said, reach out to her. And I said, okay. And so I did. Which is the funny thing is that I know that you're not going to believe this, but I am really not an outgoing person.
I don't believe that. You're wonderful.
I would rather, be somewhere off by myself, not having to deal with the public
Yeah.
most of the time. But I realize that, in order to get our message across, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and do things that maybe make me a little uncomfortable. So
Yep.
I've reached out to just about everybody I can think of in the NPE community, in the adoptee community, in the donor conceived community. And in fact, I'm actually working on our adoptee links because we don't have a lot. We have a lot in the NPE community. We have a lot in the donor conceived community, but the adoptee community, we have relationships with Here with Hope and Healing, which Cindy Olson McQuay is one of the founders of, and Heidi Marble from Pulled by the Root, but we don't have a lot of um, just a lot of people that are big in the adoptee community. So I've been
Yep.
reaching out to people. I have a meeting scheduled with Gregory Luce later this month. He's a very big adoptee advocate and an attorney for adoptee rights. So I've just been trying to like kind of further those strengthen those ties there, because it's going to take a village to get any kind of legislation changed on anyone's behalf. To get adoptees their original birth certificate, to get donor conceived people the right to know from the beginning who their donors are and what kind of, health history that they are facing and things like that. And, there's a lot of, good organizations out there. Right to Know is one of them, of course, and we do partner with them. But we want to have those connections to all these people that are part of our community, because we're not just NPEs. I'm an NPE, Laura's an NPE, but we have people who are adoptees. We have people who are donor conceived. Our board is made up of people from every single one of our categories. Our
Yeah.
president's an adoptee. One of our members is a donor conceived. So we try to address, the issues and concerns for all of them. And of course, I as an NPE can't speak for a donor conceived or an adoptee, but I can empathize with them and I can support them in their endeavors to have their truths, and I think it's important. I really wish that every state would open up their birth certificates so that an adoptee can get them. I know New York does it. I know a couple of other states do. I know Louisiana just did theirs not too long ago. Yay, Louisiana. Um, but it's so important. And it's not just because it would help us with our clients' cases, because sometimes it doesn't. I have a lovely woman that came to me from New York, where we knew who her mother was, but we've been trying to figure out her father, and the birth certificate doesn't list one. So that birth certificate wasn't any help there, but at least she has this document now that is the truth of where she was born and who she was and who her mom was. And, that's just so important.
Mm-hmm. Kelly, if there is any way I can help you personally, or if NPE Stories, the podcast, can help you, please just always keep me in mind. Let me know. I feel similar to you in that service work has been just getting me out of my head,
Right.
and it's given me purpose too, completely, ever since finding out I was an NPE. So I feel I agree with you on that front. But let me know, please, if there's ever anything you need from me. Will you be at the Untangling Our Roots Summit?
I was just about to ask you the same question.
Yeah.
Yes, DNAngels will be there en masse. We will be there.
Wonderful.
We will have a booth in the exhibit hall. We are speaking. So yes, I look forward to meeting you there. And of course, anyone else who's going to be there. I know Leanne Hay will be there. She will be
Yes.
at our booth. For those of you who haven't read Leanne's book, please pick it up now. It is called NPE, A Story Guide for Unexpected DNA Discoveries, and it's the handbook for navigating this tangled web that we have been thrown into. So
Wonderful.
it's a wonderful book. So yeah,
Mhm.
Peter Boney will be there.
Oh,
I
yes.
don't know who else. I just know that the two of them are going to be there because those are the two people specifically. Oh, well, obviously, Kara and Alicia from Right to Know will be there. I can't even think. I'm pretty
Is
sure.
Blaine Bettinger, is he an NPE by any chance, or just a genetic genealogist?
He is not an NPE, but I
Oh.
would hardly call him just a genetic genealogist. Blaine is going to be at the summit. He, he will be, he's our vice president of our board, actually,
Oh,
and he
he's
does angel
amazing.
work. He is amazing. He is not an NPE, but he has found adoptees in his tree and help them. So, I mean, I would hardly bet that there's a person out there that doesn't know, hasn't seen somebody in their DNA of a significant amount of centimorgans that they're like, who the heck is that? Because it's just, if you consider 10 to 15% of the population is affected by an NPE, and honestly, I think that number is actually higher, but that's just all that we know at the moment. I think it's probably closer to 20-25%. But obviously the further you go down, the less you're going to know people. But I'm sure that everybody out there, whether you're an NPE, an adoptee, a donor conceived, or none of the above, have somebody in your DNA that you just have no idea who they are or where they belong. And I'm going to test that theory actually by going and looking at my husband's DNA after we get off, because he's one of those rare people who his parents were still married when his father passed, and he's so normal it's crazy. He's got a typical normal nuclear family: mom, dad, and two sons. Dog and a picket fence. And I'm betting that if I look at his DNA, I will be able to spot somebody that does not fit either side of his family.
Yep, go search.
Yep.
Now, Kelly, if people wanted to reach out to you directly, could they do that? And what's the best way to do that?
Yes, please. You can find me either on Facebook as Kelly Grace, and you'll know it's me because I'm wearing a DNAngels shirt, and there's a little halo around my frame that says something about DNAngels on it. Or you can reach out to me via email. It's Kelly, Kelly, at DNAngels.org. Again, DNAngels has one A in it, just to confuse people.
Well, it makes sense.
It makes sense, but you can actually go to our website and DNAangels.org, and if you look under Meet Your Angels, there are pictures of all of us, Laura and myself and Aimee, and all of the people that I've mentioned pretty much during this podcast.
Oh, I appreciate this so much, Kelly. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was so nice of you to set this time aside today, and also Giving Tuesday was wonderful talking to you that day. If you can still remember, I'm sure
I remember it. You were one of my highlights because you were one of the people I had not ever spoken to before, and I was like, I am really excited about this because, Lily is a new subject for me. So now I can ask questions that I don't already know the answers to, because with some of them I already knew kind of what the answers were going to be. But I appreciate everything you do. Please keep doing your podcast, and maybe we'll shuttle some good stories to you as we do. You can feel free to pick off our website too.
Yeah, great. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yes, in Louisville. And everybody who wants to come to the summit can definitely come. It's March 30th through April 1st in Louisville, Kentucky. So it's not too far from any one place. I'll be flying in from Atlanta.
Wonderful. I will. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. Enjoy the rest of your day today.
Thank you. You too, Lily. Have a wonderful day.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.